Every once in a while, life writes a story that doesn't need words. It doesn't need explanations, or promises, or speeches. It needs only two hearts, innocent,
unguarded, pure, to find each other in a quiet home
where the laughter of young parents echoed softly against the walls. Two new lives began almost together. One was a baby, only a few months old, her eyes still learning to recognize the world. The other was a puppy, no bigger than a loaf of bread, his golden fur shining like the morning sun, his tail wagging without rhythm, without reason, except for the joy of being alive. What happened when these two souls met for the very first time wasn't simply an introduction. It wasn't just curiosity or playfulness. It was something deeper, something timeless, a bond of love born in a single instant. Baby's tiny fingers, a puppy's curious
nose, one squeal of laughter, one
soft bark of joy, and a friendship unlike any other began. This is their story, not of one childhood, but of two, not of one journey, but of two souls growing together, through days of discovery, nights of comfort, playful mischief, and lessons that life itself teaches. It is a story that reminds us true friendship doesn't need to be taught, it doesn't need to be explained, it just needs to be felt. The living room was bathed in warm sunlight that afternoon. A soft blanket lay spread across the carpet,
and on it the baby kicked her legs in excitement.
Her little fists waving in the air, she made no words, only tiny sounds, coos, squeals, and laughter that made the room feel alive. From the hallway came a different kind of sound, the click of tiny claws on wooden floorboards, the shuffle of hesitant steps. The new puppy was being carried in, wriggling in the arms of his new family. His tail wagged furiously, but his head tilted in nervous curiosity. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air, catching the scent of milk, powder, and something new, something gentle. The parents lowered the puppy onto the floor. For a second, he froze. The baby squealed, and the puppy's ears perked up. Cautiously, step by step, he moved forward. The parents held their breath,
unsure what would happen. Then it happened. The puppy leaned down,
and his cold little nose brushed against the baby's hand. The baby gasped, then let out the purest laugh, a laugh that filled the whole room with warmth. The puppy barked once, a soft sound of play, and wagged his tail faster than ever. It was a moment no one could have planned, no one could have written. Two lives touched, and a bond was sealed. The parents exchanged a look, the look of people who know they've just witnessed the beginning of something unforgettable. The days that followed were filled with wonder. The baby watched, everything the puppy did with wide, fascinated eyes. When he chased his tail, spinning in endless circles, she laughed until her tiny belly shook. When he tumbled and rolled, she squealed in delight. The puppy was just as curious. He studied the baby as if she were a puzzle. The strange noises she made, the way her hands waved in the air, the sparkle of her eyes when she cried, his head tilted, his ears standing tall as if he understood. Sometimes he whined, as though sharing her sadness. One afternoon, the baby's hand clutched at his fur. Her grip was clumsy, almost too tight. The parents panicked,
worried the puppy would yelp, but he didn't. He stayed still, patient.
His dark eyes soft. It was as if he already knew, this is my little human,
and she means no harm. Soon a rhythm emerged. Where the baby was,
the puppy was. When she lay in her crib, he curled up on the rug beside it. When she napped in her stroller, he trotted faithfully behind. They were discovering each other, discovering the world, and, without realizing it, discovering love. The nights were hardest for the parents. The baby often woke crying, her small voice breaking the silence of the house, but they soon noticed something remarkable. The puppy always woke before they did. The moment the baby cried, his ears twitched, and he padded across the floor. He sat by the crib, whining softly, pressing his head against the wooden bars, and then something magical happened. The baby, seeing him there, began to calm. Her cries softened into hiccups, her tiny hands reaching toward him. Sometimes she fell back asleep simply by watching him, his steady presence enough to soothe her fears. Other nights, he refused to return to his bed. Instead, he curled beneath the crib, as though guarding her through the darkness. The steady sound of his breathing filled the room, and the baby drifted off in peace. The parents whispered to each other, "He's not just a pet anymore. He's her protector." And so the puppy claimed his role. Not just as a playmate, not just as a companion, but as the silent guardian of her nights. Every milestone in a baby's life feels like magic. The first smile, the first word, the first crawl, but nothing carries more anticipation than the first steps. The day had come when the little girl, now strong enough to pull herself up, tried to balance on her wobbly legs. She gripped the edge of the sofa with determination. Her parents crouched nearby,
Cameras ready, hearts pounding with excitement. And there he was, her puppy. No longer as tiny as before,
but still clumsy, still brimming with energy. He sat just a few feet away, his tail sweeping the floor in rapid excitement. His eyes never left her. The baby let go, one shaky step forward, then another. Her little body trembled, her arms stretched out for balance. The puppy barked once,
loud and sharp as though saying, "You can do it."
The baby laughed mid-step, encouraged by the sound. A third step, then a stumble. She toppled forward onto the carpet. The parents rushed to comfort her, but they weren't the first to reach. The puppy bounded over, licking her cheek with frantic joy. His tail wagged so fast it blurred behind him. Instead of crying, the baby broke into laughter, hugging him tightly. Her first steps hadn't ended in disappointment. They had ended in celebration, and from that day onward, every time she practiced walking, her furry cheerleader was right there, trotting beside her, falling when she fell, rising when she rose. It was no longer just a milestone for her. It was a shared victory for them both. The house grew noisier as both the child and the puppy grew. Bright rattles, building blocks and dolls filled the nursery. Chew ropes, squeaky bones, and tennis balls cluttered the corners. At first, there was a clear line between hers and his. But children and puppies don't understand boundaries the way adults do. One morning, the baby picked up his ball, clumsy fingers gripping the worn rubber. With a tiny swing of her arm, she tossed it a few feet. The puppy sprang forward, caught it, and then, to everyone's surprise, returned it straight into her lap. Her giggle filled the room. She threw it again. Again, he brought it back. The first game of fetch wasn't played by a grown-up. It was invented by a baby and her puppy. Another day, she offered him her teddy bear. The parents gasped,
expecting the toy to be shredded in seconds, but the puppy didn't bite. He sniffed it,
then lay down beside it as if honoring the gift. Slowly, their toys became shared treasures. Blocks turned into chewing puzzles. Rattles became musical instruments for playtime duets. Every toy held not just play, but love. The baby learned generosity, the joy of giving without fear. The puppy learned patience, the discipline of holding back his instincts, and, together, they learned that true friendship is not about possession. It's about sharing everything you have. Feeding time in a home with a baby is never neat. Food lands everywhere, will turn on the table, the chair, the floor. But in this house, what could have been mess became comedy. The baby, now old enough to sit in her high chair, experimented with food, mashed bananas smeared across her hands. Pieces of bread dropped like rain. Her little spoon became more weapon than utensil. And the puppy? He had already learned the secret. He sat faithfully at her feet, tail wagging, eyes bright, waiting for the inevitable. At first, the drops were accidents, but soon the baby discovered the joy of watching him gobble every bite. She began to feed him deliberately, dropping food with a mischievous grin. Each time he caught it, she clapped her hands in triumph. The parents tried to keep order, but laughter often defeated discipline. Dinner became a performance, the baby the chef, the puppy her most loyal customer. What could have been frustration turned into bonding. She learned joy in giving.
Even from her high chair, he learned to wait,
To trust, to never snatch, and always gentle, always kind. Snatch and always gentle, always kind. And though the floor required endless cleaning, the parents wouldn't have traded those moments for anything, because mealtime in their house wasn't just about food, it was about laughter, generosity, and a friendship fed with crumbs of love. If the house was their nest, the garden was their kingdom. Every afternoon, as the sun dipped low, the baby toddled out into the yard, her puppy bounding at her side. The grass tickled her ankles. The flowers danced with the breeze. The puppy darted ahead, chasing butterflies, barking at birds. Splashing in puddles, the baby followed, clapping, laughing, her small hands reaching out to catch the world. Sometimes they rolled in the grass, side by side, faces tilted to the sky. Sometimes they dug little holes, his paws quick, her fingers messy. Together they returned indoors, covered in dirt. But glowing with joy, the seasons turned, each one painting their playground with a new story. Spring brought blossoms to chase. Summer gave them sprinklers to splash under. Autumn covered the ground with leaves, which they kicked and rolled in endlessly. Winter turned the garden white, and for the first time they made snow angels. One with tiny boots,
one with happy paws. Every tree became a
castle, every stick became a sword, every corner of the yard became a treasure chest of memories. The garden wasn't just land, it was their stage, their
school, their magical kingdom, and together
they were its rulers. One crown made of innocence, the other of loyalty. Milestones are the markers of childhood. First words, first birthdays, first days of school. But in this house, those milestones were never reached. Alone, every candle blown was echoed by a joyful bark. Every new toy unwrapped was followed by a wagging tail. Every laugh was answered by a nuzzle of warm fur. When the little girl turned 1, the puppy sat proudly beside her high chair. Someone tied a small paper hat on his head, and though it slipped over his eyes, he didn't mind. He looked almost as proud as her parents did, because it wasn't just her birthday, it was his too, the birthday of their friendship. When she learned her first words, it wasn't Mama or Papa, it was his name. The puppy barked in response, and the whole family laughed through tears. Her very first connection to language had been formed through love. As she grew older, every school morning began the same way. The dog waited by the door, tail wagging, watching her little backpack swing as she left, and every afternoon, when she returned, he greeted her as though she'd been gone for years. bounding forward, licking her hands, circling her in joy. Homework was done with him sprawled at her feet. Playtime was never without him. Birthdays, holidays, rainy days, he was there, a constant in every memory. For her, milestones were not lonely victories, they were shared achievements, because no matter what changed, she always had someone cheering for her, not with words, but with presence, with loyalty, with love. By now, their friendship had deepened into something words could never fully capture. It wasn't just about games, or meals, or laughter anymore. It was about care, about responsibility, about love so strong. It was instinct. When she scraped her knee falling in the garden, he was there before her parents. He licked her tears, pressing his warm head against her hand until the sobs turned into sniffles, then into laughter. When he grew tired one summer, lying under the shade of the tree, she didn't run off to play alone. She sat beside him quietly, stroking his fur, whispering stories only he would ever hear. Perhaps he didn't understand the words, but he understood the heart. There were nights when she woke from bad dreams, frightened and trembling. She didn't call for her parents, she called his name, and within seconds his paws padded across the room, and he curled beside her bed. His warmth chased the nightmares away. Theirs was a bond beyond play. It was loyalty that needed no teaching. It was trust that never wavered. It was love so unconditional. It didn't demand, it didn't question, it only gave. The parents often looked at them and whispered, "They're not just friends.
They're family." And they were right, because what they shared wasn't
Temporary, it was eternal. Time.
has a way of moving forward. The baby became a
Child. The child grew into a young girl. The puppy became a strong, loyal dog. But though the world around them shifted, their bond never broke. When she learned to ride her first bike, he ran beside her, barking as if keeping rhythm with the wheels. When she read her first storybook, she read aloud to him, her voice full of excitement. His ears tilted as though he understood every word. They grew together, season after season. She painted pictures of him at school. He carried her secrets in silence. She grew taller, but still leaned against him when she was tired. He grew older, but still guarded her door at night. The milestones continued. New friends, new schools,
new adventures, but she never outgrew him, and he never stopped being her constant. At every sunset,
their shadows stretched across the garden.
always side by side, and no matter how much she grew, whenever she looked back,
He was there, her protector, her partner, her best friend. They weren't just growing older, they were growing closer. Because true friendship doesn't fade with time. It strengthens, it deepens, it becomes the foundation of who we are. And so, their story is not just about a baby and a puppy. It is about what happens when two innocent souls meet at the beginning of life. It is about how love grows, not through words, but through actions, through patience, through loyalty, through presence. The baby learned generosity, patience and comfort, lessons no classroom could teach. The puppy learned trust, care and devotion, instincts shaped by love. Together, they reminded the world of one simple truth. The purest friendships are the ones we don't choose. They choose us. We often look for meaning in big places, in books, in speeches, in achievements, but sometimes the greatest lesson is found in the smallest of hands, holding on to the softest of fur. Sometimes the teacher is not a professor or a parent, but a puppy with loyal eyes. Sometimes the greatest comfort is not a gift, but a presence, constant, unshakable, and full of love. The story of the baby and her puppy tells us this: love doesn't need to be earned, friendship doesn't need to be explained, and family doesn't always come by blood. Sometimes it comes on 4 legs with a wagging tail and a promise written not in words, but in the beating of 2 hearts, growing side by side. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories of love, loyalty, and friendship.